Today, we're breaking down the official Iranian stance on its relationship with the U.S. All of this comes straight from a recent, pretty high-stakes interview with Iran's foreign minister. We're going to look at the key obstacles, what a potential deal could actually look like, and the two very, very different futures that could come out of all this. Let's get into it.
So right off the bat, when asked about the threat of war, the minister said something that might surprise you. He's not really concerned about an intentional war. Why? Because he believes Iran is completely prepared for one. The real danger, he says, is something else entirely, a miscalculation.
And that right there raises the big question. If we assume both sides want to avoid a direct conflict, then what's the actual roadblock? What's stopping a diplomatic solution?
Okay, so let's unpack that whole idea of being ready for war. The minister argues that Iran's military readiness isn't about starting a fight, it's about preventing one. Deterrence. From his point of view, being prepared for a conflict is actually the best way to make sure it never happens.
He gets pretty specific about the threat, too. He's not worried about a deliberate attack from the U.S. What he is worried about are these miscalculations that are fueled by bad information. Basically, he's suggesting that other countries might try to drag the U.S. into a war that serves their interests. So, if the biggest risk is miscalculation, you'd think the solution would be clear communication, right? Well, that's where we hit the biggest wall of all, a really deep lack of trust.
And this is the heart of the matter, at least from the Iranian perspective. The minister just lays it out there. The basic trust you need for direct talks, he says it's gone. It just isn't there. So where did this mistrust come from? Well, he points to a pretty clear series of events. It starts in 2015 with the JCPOA. That's the original nuclear deal. Then, fast forward to 2018, and the U.S. just pulls out of it on its own. And even more recently, he claims that as they were trying to negotiate last year, they were attacked. So you can see how that history makes them really hesitant to jump back into direct talks. Okay, so if direct talks are off the table, what's the alternative? I mean, is anyone talking at all? The answer is yes, but it's not direct.
The way the minister describes it, the process is this really careful step-by-step thing. They're using friendly countries in the region to pass messages back and forth. And the goal right now isn't some big grand deal. It's much smaller. It's about slowly building just enough confidence to, as he puts it, prepare the ground for actual negotiations later on.
And here, we get a little glimmer of optimism. Despite all these huge issues, the minister says these back-channel talks through intermediaries have actually been fruitful. It kind of suggests that even without talking face-to-face, maybe, just maybe, some progress is being made.
All right, so let's say they finally get to the negotiating table. What would a deal even look like? Well, the minister lays out a very, very specific offer.
At its core, the whole thing boils down to a fundamental trade. Iran says, look, we will guarantee our nuclear program never, ever produces weapons. It'll stay peaceful forever, and you can verify it. In return, what they want is a complete lifting of all sanctions, and for their right to peaceful nuclear enrichment to be respected.
And it isn't just say a deal is possible. He makes it sound like it could be done fast. That really suggests that if the talks could just focus only on the nuclear issue, a solution might not have to be this long, drawn-out thing.
But, and this is a big but, the nuclear program isn't the only issue. And this is where the priorities really start to diverge, and it creates another huge hurdle for any kind of comprehensive peace.
See, from the U.S. point of view, any serious talks have to include these other massive security issues, namely Iran's advanced ballistic missile program and its network of allied militias, its proxy forces, all across the Middle East.
Iran's position, though, it's the complete opposite. The minister says the real source of tension in the region isn't Iran. It's the presence of foreign armies. He argues that regional security should be handled by the countries in the region and that Iran is totally ready to talk with its neighbors about it, but without any outside powers at the table.
So this disagreement, it's fundamental, and it leaves two starkly different paths forward. The interview really lays out both the amazing potential of a peaceful outcome and the absolutely disastrous alternative.
The stakes here are just incredibly high. On one hand, the minister talks about huge possibilities for economic cooperation. He even brings up a past deal with Boeing as an example of how American companies would be welcome if sanctions were gone. But on the other hand, he warns that a war would be a disaster for everybody, and because of all the U.S. military bases in the area, it would inevitably spread across the entire region. So, We end up right back where we started, with this crisis of trust, where the biggest fear isn't a war that someone wants, but one that starts by accident. The path to a deal is there, it's clear, but it is incredibly narrow, and the consequences of failure are, well, they're catastrophic. Which leaves us with the question, can diplomacy actually overcome miscalculation?